Hello, and welcome to another edition of This Fucking Guy, the video series where we pick apart a fucking guy who has made America worse. I'm Erin Ryan, host of Crooked Media's Hysteria podcast.
And I'm Alyssa Mastromonaco, the other host of Crooked Media's Hysteria podcast.
Alyssa, on this series, we've covered a diverse array of fucking guys from a variety of fields. But in addition to making America worse, they all share one important trait.
Well, we've yet to do a crossover This Fucking Guy with People Magazine's Sexiest Man Alive, nor are we covering Nobel nominees. Erin, I am lost. What's the trait?
The trait is delusion. No matter how much damage they've done or how boring their tactics, how simple and smooth their brains, fucking guys believe themselves to be cool and tough badasses. And most of them are simply weenies with no shame.
All true, Erin. My loins are girded.
And nobody is a bigger intransigent weenie than today's subject, Mitch McConnell.
An empty skin suit who has proven he will do and say almost anything to get reelected. A smug, oily man who has done more damage to two of the three branches of government than just about anyone.
He is a cartoon of why Americans hate Congress.
I hate this fucking guy.
You're going to feel even more strongly when we're done today.
I have no doubt.
Okay. Addison Mitchell McConnell III was born in Alabama.
What? His real name is Addison, Erin?
Addison III. He was an only child, and he was named after his father, who was named after his uncle. Mitch's family owned a funeral home. When he was 2 years old, he fell seriously ill with polio, and his family nearly went broke paying for his treatments.
Another thing that fucking guys seem to have in common. They face some sort of hardship as children, but rather than wanting people to be spared of that hardship, they think that because they suffered a hardship, it would actually be unfair if other people didn't have to suffer too.
Yeah, truly a broken-brained way to impede progress. McConnell, even though he had the personality of an invasive species of grass, was involved in student government as early as high school, where he discovered that the way to get elected when you have no charisma is to convince the voters that the popular kids like you.
An early pioneer in influencer marketing.
Yes, Mitch McConnell was the original charcoal toothpaste or mail-order waist trainer. He was in college during the height of the Vietnam War and in 1967 had a brief, mysterious 4-month stint serving in the Army Reserves.
We love a mysterious stint. What happened?
Well, McConnell enlisted in the reserves in March of that year, but reported to boot camp at Fort Knox, Kentucky in July. A month later, he was discharged for a common medical condition called optic neuritis.
Optic neuritis can be treated with a steroid and completely alleviated in a matter of a few weeks.
That's not the only weird thing about Mitch's time in the military. He's never released his discharge papers publicly. There was a letter, however, sent by Senator John Cooper to the commanding officer at Fort Knox, urging McConnell's expedited discharge because McConnell needed to enroll at New York University. Weirdly, McConnell had just so happened to intern with Cooper in 1964, and double weirdly, McConnell never did end up enrolling at New York University.
In 1967, the military needed all the help it could get. So why were they letting able-bodied men like Mitch leave scot-free because of minor, easily treatable medical conditions?
Ask Donald Trump's alleged bone spurs. Mitch married his first wife, Sherrill Redmond, in 1968, and the two had 3 daughters together. After their divorce in 1980, Redmond became, and I'm not making any of this up, a leading feminist scholar who worked at Smith College, leading the Sophia Smith collection. On her last day at Smith, the all-women's college praised Sherrill for her work making sure the collection included more marginalized voices. Quote, "These new materials provide strong evidence that women of color worked for gender equality long before 1963, participated in the so-called second wave of feminism, critiqued it for not adequately reflecting their concerns, and incorporated some of its practices into their own women's movements that burgeoned in the 1980s and continued to thrive in the first decade of the 21st century," unquote. Talk about winning your divorce.
Erin, Mitch McConnell was married to the perfect Hysteria guest? A Seven Sisters icon?
Yeah, I want to know more about her. At least one of Mitch McConnell's daughters has devoted her life to left-wing causes. His daughter, Porter McConnell, is the director of Take on Wall Street.
Netflix should make their Thanksgivings an annual holiday special.
As much as I'd rather talk about his groovy-ass ex-wife and kid, let's get back to our fucking guy who sits perched like a vulture at the axis of boring and evil. Mitch McConnell bounced back and forth between Washington and Kentucky, one of those psychos who never really had a life or career outside of politics, because he doesn't seem to have an interest in anything else. The first time he tried to run for office in Kentucky, he was disqualified because he didn't actually live in Kentucky.
A tale as old as time.
There are moments in many fucking guys' lives when you look back and think, if only this bad person had gotten what they wanted at this point, things may have been different.
Like Hitler getting rejected from art school.
Yes, like Hitler. Mitch returned to Washington to work as a deputy assistant attorney general under President Gerald Ford. While he was there, his coworkers included famously unhinged Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia and famously rejected Supreme Court nominee Robert Bork.
Famously crazy rejected Supreme Court nominee.
Yes, Bork was bonkers, but Bork borked so that Antonin Scalia could fly, which is another story for another this fucking guy. So after making friends with two of the worst people in America, Mitch returned to Kentucky. His first elected office post-school stuff was Jefferson County Judge/Executive, which was the closest thing that resembled a mayor in the northern Kentucky county that contains Louisville.
I'm so curious what he was like as a sort of mayor. Did he get anything done or just stop things from getting done and call it a day? Was he always a proud obstructionist, the governing equivalent of having a rock in your shoe?
No, it's probably not going to come as a surprise that McConnell is a shapeshifter who says whatever he needs to say to hang on to power. McConnell denies this, but many sources in Kentucky politics say that in his early political career, Mitch was pro-choice. Oh. And back then in the late 1970s and into the early 80s, portraying himself as some kind of conservative pragmatist was what helped him win elections.
This tracks since he was still married to the very smart progressive woman. Until...
Well, in 1984, McConnell ran for Senate against popular two-term Democrat Walter D. Huddleston. The odds were against Mitch in this race. At one point, polling showed that he was down 40 points, a difficult deficit to overcome when you have no personality. But then along came Roger Ailes.
Future Fox News sex pest Roger Ailes?
Yeah, that'd be pretty wild if there were two different conservative media operatives named Roger Ailes.
Not much crazier than there being two Johns Favreau in Hollywood?
Point taken. So then Nixon advisor Ailes comes in, Job of the Hutt-like even in his youth, and helps the McConnell campaign make an ad alleging that Senator D. Huddleston was skipping important votes to make money on speaking engagements. You'll notice that the ad, where a tracker uses a pack of bloodhounds to look for the missing senator, doesn't feature McConnell's name or face until the end, perhaps wisely.
So was Huddleston actually skipping votes?
Yes. Like many in Ailes' joint, there were kernels of truth in the ad. But the thing was, Huddleston was present for 94% of the Senate votes, which was about in line with the norm for the Senate. And more importantly, Huddleston wasn't breaking any rules.
But let me guess, voters didn't care.
Yes, the flaming bag of dog poop had been thrown, and the mess was too much for Huddleston's campaign to clean up in the final weeks of the campaign. Mitch McConnell became the only Republican to unseat an incumbent Democratic senator in 1984. The Bloodhound ad played a big part in that, but there were other factors as well.
Yeah, if you were a Republican running for a long shot office, 1984 was just about the best year to do it. That was the year that Ronald Reagan won every state's electoral votes but one.
Minnesota, once again, on the right side of history. And in a stunning early display of Washingtonian hypocrisy, 2 years after lambasting Huddleston for earning outside money on speeches, then Senator McConnell went on a very profitable 11-day speaking tour of the West Coast. And almost immediately after taking office, McConnell started accepting money from the tobacco industry for speeches. More on that in a second.
That's one way that McConnell has been consistent throughout his career, being a hypocrite.
Yeah, he wrote the famous Republican proverb, "It's bad because you're doing it, but it's fine because I'm doing it." Safely in Washington, McConnell became a passionate advocate for everything that would get him reelected. So brave. Somebody who was always willing to go to the mat and stick his neck out for the big guy, whoever the big guy was. One of his more famous hobby horses was fighting regulations on big tobacco.
Why is it so unsurprising that in the battle against cancer, Mitch would be on cancer side?
I mean, they have a lot in common. McConnell fought against regulating the tobacco industry every chance he got. Dude loved cigarettes. He's fought against things like letting the FDA oversee tobacco and banning smoking on airplanes. Wow, Mitch, wrong side of that one. A 2019 NPR investigation found that McConnell had, for decades, publicly denied that there was a link between tobacco use and adverse health effects, sometimes repeating tobacco industry-generated talking points verbatim. And in millions of recently public tobacco industry documents that are searchable online, McConnell's name comes up again and again as a friend of the industry.
So funny too, Erin, because McConnell, who has never been much of a smoker, if a smoker at all, told the Wall Street Journal in 2015 after John Boehner retired that he missed Boehner but was enjoying, quote, the much clearer air now, that Boehner's smoke no longer wafts through the Capitol. But I digress. Wait, weren't a lot of elected officials enriching themselves with big tobacco blood money at the time?
Yes, but none so much as Mitch McConnell. Nobody took more money from tobacco than Mitch did, and nobody demanded more money than Mitch did once he personally called a tobacco lobbying group when a promised $1,000 donation hadn't yet hit his campaign's account.
Eye on the ball, Mitch.
Yeah, NPR and local Kentucky media found that McConnell had been paid millions of dollars in speaking fees, political donations, and other gifts from the tobacco industry over the years. One of the more egregious examples of Mitch's willingness to debase himself for the benefit of big tobacco happened in 1998 when Senator John McCain had introduced a bill to increase regulation on the tobacco industry and increase penalties on tobacco companies that failed to reduce teen smoking. The bill was popular with the general public and with his fellow senators.
Right, because in 1998, we were all well aware of the dangers of smoking and how the tobacco industry had been chasing the lucrative teen market for years.
Yes, and the industry spent $40 million on an ad campaign fighting the bill. And God knows how much on Mitch McConnell. And they got a lot in return. But the worst part about it was, in a closed-door meeting with his fellow Republicans, Mitch basically bribed them, promising that if his colleagues voted against McCain's bill, which again was very popular with voters, the tobacco industry would reward them with campaign contributions in their districts as they ran for re-election. And this was reported in the Wall Street Journal. John McCain was at this meeting and witnessed McConnell's bribey promise. And years later, when he and McConnell would get into it over McCain's proposed campaign finance reforms, which McConnell, of course, opposed, in an incredible moment of legislative bitchiness, McCain would reference this infamous moment on the Senate floor. And as for the bill, only 57 of the senators pledged to vote for it, and so it failed.
And of course, we can blame the filibuster for that one.
Yep, Mitch McConnell got to use his favorite anti-democratic tool to stop the bill in its tracks. McConnell has since defended his time as a helpmate for the tobacco industry, claiming that a substantial portion of the Kentucky economy was directly related to the cultivation of tobacco, which also isn't and wasn't true. In 1998, only 3% of the state's economy was tobacco-related, but the state did have the highest number of tobacco-related cancer deaths. We often think of Mitch McConnell as a sort of human termite colony that destroyed the functionality and reputation of the Senate, or the lube that enabled dark money of anonymous billionaire donors to more smoothly fuck over our entire government in ways it was never intended to be fucked. But if you know anybody who died of a smoking-related illness in the last few decades, well, Mitch might have had a little something to do with that, too.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. You guys, comparison really is the thief of joy, and it's so easy to envy other people's lives, especially on social media these days. Listen, I have not gotten to where I am by not getting a little bit of help, okay? I have talked to a therapist, I take medicine, and everybody should get the help that they need. And BetterHelp makes it so easy for you to talk to someone who can get you out of your own head and get you the help that you need. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/hysteriapod today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/hysteriapod.
Mitch loved the tobacco industry because he loved money. Mitch McConnell loves money more than anything else in the world. He talks about dark money with the tenderness of St. Francis of Assisi talking about taking care of animals.
A model public servant.
McConnell would do whatever it took to get money, keep money, make it easier for people to give him money. In 1993, he married Elaine Chao, a billionaire shipping heiress who somehow magically was appointed chair of the Maritime Commission by Ronald Reagan.
No conflict of interest there.
Throughout their marriage, Chow was able to skate into higher and higher profile appointments, including Secretary of Labor under George W. Bush and Secretary of Transportation under Donald Trump. Her father's company, which was until recently run by her American-born sister, has dealt with sticky rumored ties to the Chinese government. Chow has long battled accusations that her frequent appearances in interviews alongside her father have given the impression that the U.S. government is directly backing her family's shipping company. It's a whole mess. More importantly, Chow and McConnell have used each other to maintain access and influence across the U.S. government for decades.
What an iconic partnership.
A nightmare power couple. Allegations of corruption followed Chow like the scent trail of a fine perfume. In 2000, a slurry pond owned by Massey Energy burst open in Kentucky. The spill killed a million fish and poisoned groundwater used by thousands of people. On the literal day George W. Bush was sworn in, the investigation into that spill was halted. Chow had been announced as Secretary of Labor, which put her in charge of the Mine Safety and Health Administration. Alyssa, guess who got a fuckload of campaign contributions from Massey Energy?
Mitch McConnell?
Yeah, between 1990 and 2000, Mitch received more money from Massey than all but one other politician. And coal-related interests donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to the National Republican Senate Committee when Mitch was in charge.
But what about the water that the pond poisoned?
It's still poison, but McConnell has bragged about securing funds to clean it up.
Wow, he's the cause and solution to Kentucky's problems.
One of Mitch's particularly gross verbal jiggery-pokery is his tendency to equate giving money to politicians with having free speech.
A slimy verbal sleight of hand that most of us remember from the Supreme Court's disastrous Citizens United ruling, which opened the floodgates to legalizing the dark money that is drowning the voices of regular Americans.
Actually, McConnell's greasy fingerprints are all over that, too. Remember how I mentioned John McCain's righteously bitchy outburst about McConnell's corruption during a debate about campaign finance reform? Well, unlike McCain's tobacco bill, the campaign finance reform bill passed and became law, basically choking off the supply of special interest money to federal political campaigns.
I wonder if there was a support group for him, Dark Money Lovers Anonymous.
Well, Mitch McConnell himself challenged the McCain-Feingold Act all the way up to the Supreme Court and lost. But Mitch McConnell is nothing if not a tenacious little fucking twerp. He and a gaggle of money interests, including the DeVos family, kept going after the law until that fight culminated with the Citizens United case. And we all know what happened then.
The darkest kind of chaos.
Citizens United, arguably one of the worst cases in Supreme Court history that has done more damage to American politics than most other judicial fuckery. Now let's get into McConnell's antics when he was Republican Senate leader during the Obama administration. Alyssa, I know you've got some personal experience here. Do you have any special memories of Mitch McConnell during the Obama White House years?
Oh, Erin, just the memory of Mitch McConnell saying, quote, "The most important thing we, the Republicans, want to achieve is for President Obama to be a one-term president." I love when our elected officials are just rooting for America.
Thank goodness he failed. Let's start with how he turned the Senate into a constipated colon. Democrats had control of the Senate during the early years of the Obama White House, but that didn't keep McConnell, who was the minority leader at the time, from filibustering fucking everything. McConnell believed that any bipartisanship at all from Republicans would help Obama win a second term, and so he refused to go along with anything, even popular things, healthcare reform, banking reform.
And through it all, McConnell managed to maintain a reputation for being boring as fuck. Here's former President Obama making some jokes at a White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Of course, even after I've done all this, some folks still don't think I spend enough time with Congress. Why don't you get a drink with Mitch McConnell, they ask. Really? Why don't you get a drink with Mitch McConnell?
Back in the day, they could have shared a cig. Oh, wait, right. Keep forgetting. McConnell never smoked. He just wanted others to.
Cigarettes for thee, but not for me. McConnell unsuccessfully opposed the Supreme Court nominations of Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, but he did successfully oppose a lot of Obama's nominations to lower courts, creating a huge backlog by threatening to filibuster nominee after nominee. In 2013, Democrats eliminated the filibuster on all judicial nominees, except for the Supreme Court nominees. And of course, McConnell threw a fit. But in 2017, he would eliminate the filibuster even for Supreme Court nominees himself, so that Trump nominee Neil Gorsuch could be confirmed. And then 2 years later, he wrote an op-ed against eliminating the filibuster for anything else.
Okay, I guess it's time to talk about Merrick Garland.
Yeah, I suppose it is. Okay. In 2016, conservative Supreme Court Justice and former McConnell co-worker Antonin Scalia died at a luxury hunting ranch in Texas where he was up to totally normal and not weird at all stuff. Then President Barack Obama nominated moderate D.C. Circuit Court Judge Merrick Garland to replace Scalia. But McConnell made up a rule that presidents shouldn't get to pick Supreme Court justices during election years. And so the Senate held Garland's nomination until Donald Trump was inaugurated less than a year later.
And of course, Garland's failed nomination would have a cascadingly disastrous effect on the Supreme Court. Because of McConnell's obstructionism, Trump got 3 Supreme Court nominations instead of 2. And rather than having a 5-4 conservative majority on the court, we now have 6-3. There are some legal scholars who believe that if Garland's nomination had gone through, Roe v. Wade would still stand.
And, of course, McConnell's made-up rule that a president can't nominate a Supreme Court justice in an election year did not apply when Donald Trump barely waited until Ruth Bader Ginsburg was in the ground before nominating Amy Coney Barrett to replace her just weeks before the 2020 election.
McConnell was also on the wrong side of the Russian election interference thing.
Oh, yes. For somebody who is frequently touted as some kind of strategic savant, he's consistently one of the wrongest bitches in the game. In the summer of 2016, CIA Director John Brennan tried to brief McConnell on the urgent national security matter of Russian election interference. McConnell dodged him like a bad Tinder date. And when he finally allowed himself to find out what was going on, he threatened President Obama if Obama warned the American people about it. When Obama and leaders of the House and Senate finally decided to do something about this Russia thing by issuing some kind of warning, Mitch slow-walked the public warning, rewriting the letter warning the public in such a mucked-up way that it was totally unclear that A, it was the Russians targeting our elections, and B, they were targeting election equipment in all 50 states.
Whoopsie! This brings us to the Trump years. One thing that was semi-enjoyable about that time was witnessing how much Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump hated each other, but needed each other because both needed the money and the power that only the other could provide.
Because as Mitch McConnell is the sluttiest senator of all time, Donald Trump was the sluttiest president. Watching them try to work together was like watching a closeted youth pastor kiss his bride for the first time.
Like on TLC's short-lived reality show, Virgin Diaries.
And I know you watched that, Alyssa.
You know I did.
So under Trump, McConnell tried to balance keeping that sweet, sweet money flowing to him by not pissing off Trump's base too much with keeping that sweet, sweet government open by not indulging the president's manic know-nothing fantasies about how things work. And he didn't totally succeed. McConnell was in charge of the Senate during the longest government shutdown in history, from late December 2018 until late January 2019. The standoff was over funds for President Trump's dumb border wall. During the shutdown, McConnell kept trying to play the obstructionism card by blocking appropriations bills, and in the process made just about everybody mad.
Legislative genius at work right there.
And throughout Trump's presidency, McConnell had many chances to protect the institutions he had once claimed to care about, but proved time and time again that he feared Trump's base getting mad at him more than he loved anything else. In 2017, he briefly grew a rubbery spine, condemning the white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, kind of.
That bar's so low that even a limbo world champion would have a hard time getting under it.
Yeah, McConnell took a lot of L's in 2017. In July of that year, McConnell was so very close to repealing the Affordable Care Act, but that attempt failed by one vote. His old pal John McCain, who killed McConnell's obstructionist dream with a cunty little thumbs down.
McCain was a good dude. McConnell tried so hard to undo Obamacare and just failed over and over, thank God.
McConnell also fumbled the bag on COVID-19. On March 12, 2020, which you may recall was after President Trump had already declared a state of emergency as we faced the impending COVID pandemic, Mitch McConnell dismissed the Senate for a long weekend and flew back to Kentucky. What he should have done was something. What he did do was nothing. When he decided to come back to work, McConnell tried to ram through a coronavirus relief bill that was little more than a handout or hand job, maybe, to big businesses. But that failed because several of Mitch's Republican colleagues were in quarantine at the time and couldn't vote.
Sorry, Mitch.
Some of the blame for the federal government's inept response to the early days of the pandemic lies squarely on Mitch McConnell's sloping shoulders.
And here's something that really bothers me about how Mitch McConnell fancies himself some kind of legislative genius or Darth Vader or some kind of brilliant mind.
I mean, he narrated the audiobook version of his own autobiography. I tried to find a good clip to play of it, but I kept falling asleep. How do you make a first-hand account of the dismantling of the American experiment so boring? Well, Mitch did it.
The place I feel most at ease is the Senate, an institution that rewards patience and confounds those who lack it.
Erin, hell is a road trip with only Mitch McConnell's self-narrated autobiography on the radio.
If Mitch McConnell is a genius legislator, my toddler throwing a fit and lying down in front of the front door is a genius at getting us out of the house in time. It is not some work of genius to be the guy who wrecks things. It is much easier to be an arsonist than it is to be an architect. But January 6th would prove to be a bridge too far for Mitch McConnell. On that day, as rioting Trump supporters closed in on the Capitol, McConnell delivered an 8-minute-long speech rebuking the stolen election delusion espoused by Trump and his stooges.
A rare moment where America could see their elected leaders come together, but LOL. Of course, in the weeks ahead, McConnell would not vote to impeach or convict Trump for his role as ringmaster of the insurrection. He could have barred Trump from ever running for office again, but didn't because he's a big wimp.
Yeah, by the time Biden took office, it was clear that McConnell's most formidable sucking was behind him. He suffered some health setbacks, more than once freezing in the middle of public statements, being suddenly unable to speak, which has prompted many people who have been personally harmed by Mitch McConnell's obstructionist antics to refer to the Senate Minority Leader as gently alive. But we would never do that.
No, we didn't come up with that. We're just repeating what we've heard.
Absolutely. When they go low, we take that as permission to also go low, because I am tired of getting my legs swept by the Cobra Kai that is the modern GOP. McConnell announced back in February he will not be running for re-election this year, which, given how unwell he seemed for a while, makes sense. He leaves office the longest-serving party leader in the history of the Senate. He will always be remembered for destroying the Senate and pronouncing the silent H in the word white.
Au revoir, sayonara, and das vidanya. Little Russian for good measure.
Oh, I'm sure he understands. Since he's not up for re-election, he's taken some stances that have been seen as mildly, meekly in opposition to Trump. Earlier this year on Face the Nation, he said that he still believes what he said in the aftermath of January 6th, that Trump should be held accountable by the courts and is not immune to prosecution. Attention, Supreme Court.
Extreme eye roll for anyone who shows courage when it is no longer useful.
And through it all, McConnell has done the near impossible, continued to get reelected over and over again despite remaining unlikable and unliked. Polling in 2012 and 2016 found that he had the lowest approval rating in his home state than any other senator. During the Trump era, his popularity plummeted even further, making him the senator with the lowest approval rating for much of 2017 to 2019, with a brief stint in early 2019 as no longer the least popular senator. In 2020, Maine Senator Susan Collins overtook him for a while, but rest assured, when he finally slithers out of the U.S. Capitol for the last time, he will likely be one of the top 5 least liked members of the upper chamber, an all-timer.
Personally, I'm hoping that after Mitch is no longer with us, at least some of his dirty pile of money goes to his leftist daughter, who uses it to further an anti-Wall Street agenda.
The circle of life. Alyssa, on a scale of 1 to 5 weasels, what do you think?
Erin, I'm going to go with 3 weasels here. 3. Here is why. I think that what we have learned with Republicans, whether it be when John Boehner left, is there is so much worse to come. So I'm going to stick with 3 weasels for our friend Mitch.
Okay.
What about you?
I'm going to give him 4.
Okay.
I think he would have been a hard 5 during the Obama years, but
Yes.
now he's a little bit of a shell of what he once was. And he's 4. Also, we need some breathing room. We can't just all be 5s. Okay, that is all the time we have for this edition of This Fucking Guy.
If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends.
And if you've got suggestions for who should be the next fucking guy, leave them in the comments.